Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Thank you everyone here for being a part of this conversation as well. We're talking data. How many of you have heard data is the new oil? Any responses? Everyone? Purani baat? Huh?
Data is king.
Okay. How many of you have heard data is the new soil? Okay. Okay. How many of you have heard data is the new soil on which everything grows? Okay, one hand. So a clap for the lady here, please. That is important. Data is the new soil on which everything grows. That's the time we are living in today. And the whole idea of the luminaries sitting here is to hear from them how are they leveraging data. I hope the mic is doing fine. Okay. How are they leveraging data? How do they apply some of those principles? How do they generate as well? And how do they make sense out of that? So let me start with the questions. Arvind, if I can start with you. There's a lot that's happening. We heard the Prime Minister say yesterday, he had so many data points to offer. How is at the policy, and why I also again begin with you is because the data protection bill is coming. In that context, what is the big picture that is emerging for India so that Indian companies and businesses in India can leverage data to maximize the impact and ultimately serve the consumer?
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you, GFK and the GBS team. Thank you, Ashutosh, for letting me go first, because if I was going to speak after Vishal, my talk would be redundant. So, because these are practitioners. The only difference between what they practice and what I'm going to tell you is the scale. Everything else, everything that we do is at a national scale. That's a population scale. We're talking about 1.3 billion people, 1.3 billion citizens, and that's when you talked about the geopolitics of it. Or so let me start with a few statements. Number one, data / the data and digital economy, if you extend it, as Nikhil said, is a core part of the fourth industrial revolution. There is no geopolitical discussion today, no discussion, I can say, bilateral, multilateral, plurilateral, that happens without this being on the forum. The G20 has a dedicated track for digital. So this is foremost right now. And this is completely transformed. 5 years ago, this was one of the bylines or a sub-item within a larger item. Now this is an integral part of any geopolitical discussion. And we've seen this play out over the last few years during COVID and during the Russian-Ukraine war. So I think data is integral. Now, whether it's oil, soil, air, we can keep debating that. But that's number one. Two, what is happening in this process is that India is having a very different approach to this whole data revolution. And that's very key. And I'm talking at a population scale, not at a particular problem scale. Number one is that we don't use data for profit. That's the Western model. We don't use data for surveillance. That's the Chinese model. We are using data for development. And I think that's what your panel is today, turning inflation into an opportunity. So India is looking at data as an opportunity for development. And now that is a bottom-up approach where 1.3 billion Indians get impacted. And the third key thing in this is that we are building the fine balance, because you mentioned the PDP bill, fine balance between privacy, development and innovation. And that's the core principle how we are looking at data for empowerment of citizens. And the last point I do want to make, last few points I do want to make is that everybody over here has heard of what is called the India stack. Now, what is the definition or what is the meta definition of India stack? We are building digital public goods. What you talked about, CoWIN or India stack, which has UPI, Aadhaar and DigiLocker linked into it at population scale. One example I'll give you, which I don't know how many in this room probably know, but today there's something called the account aggregator. How many of you know account aggregator? A few. Account aggregator is an open data, it's not a I stand corrected, is a digital public good, which is an open platform where all our bank accounts are now interlinked. And we have a single window into every single banking transaction across, if I have 5 banking relationships. Now, this is very powerful for credit, for example. But at what scale this is being done? You know how many accounts we have in the account aggregator framework? 1.1 billion accounts. It's not a small number. So whatever we are doing 3 things, and that's the last message I want to leave. Number 1, Indians are going digital at a scale that we never thought we are. 2, we are producing digital infrastructure like India Stack as public goods, which is available for everybody to use. Businesses like yourselves or everybody else on the panel, the government, the startups, everybody can use that. And 3, India is becoming the richest data capital in the world. We have the highest set of data points that the Prime Minister refers to. We are the data capital. When you do 40% of the global real-time financial transactions in India, 40% by the way happen in India, larger than any system in the world. Apart from the value of the transactions and the money that we are saving, we are producing such rich data sets, which, as I said, if I was to speak after Vishal, I would be redundant. He will tell you how the data sets can be used, or Nikhil will tell you how it can be used. But that is the point. The Indians are becoming the most diverse, data-rich people in the world. And this is where we have to understand that this is how to leverage it into a developmental opportunity and fighting whatever headwinds we face. So thank you.
Okay, very good point taken. And the opportunity, the account aggregator, I've read something about it, and it's still to unfold in its, in its full glory, if I were to say. Preeti, if you could come in, while the opportunity is great, you are helping, as in Luminous is helping, serve areas which may not have 24/7 power supply, or maybe backups or that. How is data helping your business? How is it driving businesses in an area where the opportunity may be a little lesser? If you can give that sense as well, because I would like to believe, while this is the opportunity Arvind spoke about, that's the other set of opportunity, ground up opportunity.
Very interesting question, and often when we talk about data for development, my mind simply goes to tier 2, tier 3 cities, where actually, for the want of a better word, the India that is developing lives. And that is in fact the potential opportunity. At Luminous Power Technologies, we actually live that world every day. But before I lean into the answer, just to get a sense, since this is a data session, how many people in the room cannot wake up without looking at their watch, or can't walk 10 steps without looking at their smartwatch? Please raise your hands. How many people actually Googled ChatGPT this morning and said, is the AI-powered session going to be any good? Raise your hands. Hey, how many people have heard of ChatGPT? Well. Okay, well, this is so I just wanted to make the point. Data is about being data hungry first. So it is a practice. And leaders of businesses have to inculcate that practice in the way they operate. That is step 1 whenever you are actually running an organization. If you are not data hungry, chances are your organization is not. Chances are your products are not. Chances are that you haven't built connected products, and chances are you didn't bother to find out the segments within which your products actually operate. So I think that's a call to action. The second piece from Luminous specifically, I'll say, is this. So the data that we've collected tells us a few things, and we do collect data. We collect data through a few sources. By the way, it all doesn't just come out in a data stack in some lake, although we'd all love for that to happen. There are parts of India where you still collect data empirically through going store to store. There are parts of India where you still collect your dealers and distributors and you say, what's selling? Everybody raise your hand. And they tell you, and you have to curate that data into some sensible data lake to make it actionable. At Luminous, we do that all day, every day, because a big portion of our customers live in tier 2 towns, Ashu, such as Jharkhand,
yeah.
Such as displayed tier 2, tier 3 cities in gaons or outside of Haryana, etc. I've had the honor and the privilege of being there. And you intently listen to your customers there. Two phenomena are actually happening as we have learned so far. The data tells us that rural and tier 2, tier 3 India is electrifying faster than the one in metros, because metros is almost coming to, or many cities in metros are coming to what is called a power surplus. So tier 2, tier 3 is where the data is telling us where our growth is. Second thing we are also seeing is a per capita income. So it's an interesting exercise we did. If you looked at 5 years ago, the product mix we used to sell, and does everybody know what Luminous sells? Great, thank you. That's data too. Marketing's done its job. So we used to sell small inverters. We used to sell 500 VA inverters. छोटे बक्से, literally, जो एक बत्ती दो पंखे types चला देते हैं. That's what we used to sell. That used to be roughly 60% of our product, or 75% of our product at one point. And then we did a 5-year granular analysis. Here's what we found. That 65% is shifting way down, and it is shifting into a different range of inverter mix. Now we sell most of our highest selling low kVA range has actually moved to 1100 VA, 1650 VA, 1450 VA. What does that mean? That means everybody has more fans, more lights, and more appliances, even at the rural India level. The second piece we saw was the small segment where we used to see very little sales, like say 10 to 20% of our sales, has gone to 30%. That's the medium segment. The 2 to 5 kVA segment, that's growing at a faster rate, and it's growing in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. And above 5 kVA is starting to grow as well. And I always have a saying that if you want to know how India's rural economy and tier 2, tier 3 economy is progressing, take Luminous product mix and actually chart it over time. It totally correlates to the number of appliances people are buying, and that correlates back to the power backup that they want to buy as they buy more appliances. And that is in fact how Luminous Power Technologies looks at it. So that, I hope that gives you an idea. But I will say this, it is centered around a culture of data that the leader leads. You have to ask the question.
Okay. So there are two companies in the consumer goods sector that let me ask them, and they'll bring very different perspectives as well. First, Daniel, if I can ask you about you can take my mic. Okay, that's good. Okay, yeah. That's good. Okay, thanks. Your experience. So Daniel's worked in Latin American countries where inflation, and we're talking in that context today, inflation is generally higher than what we're used to. For a lot of countries, for some people, 8% or 7% in India is higher. Well, in some countries, Argentina is 70-odd%, correct? Yeah. So what is the experience? How do businesses manage through the inflation? How do they create the opportunity?
Sure. Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Very nice. Thanks, Economic Times, all of you guys. Good to see you here. You're right. I mean, and I actually have had a chance to work in Latin America when we were really going through like a perfect storm, because in addition to inflation, there was also a huge devaluation of the currency, and there was also recession, and there was also some challenges. Brazil was impeaching the president at the time. So there were a lot of forces coming your way. I think there are things that we normally do if you're running a company that is internal, and then things that are external. But my experience, success, see, if you just look back, people will remember how they experienced the service and the products and what your company did during the tough times, right? So you go in with that mindset. And in many cases, you have to get to know your consumers, your customers all over again, because their dynamics change completely, right? So if you have inflation, which in essence, price goes up and your buying power comes down, many solutions or products, whatever you had commercializing before, just no longer is suitable for the consumer, for the patient. It depends. We are in the consumer space. We're also in the healthcare space. So it starts by getting to know your clients, your customers, your consumers from scratch. don't assume that you know the reality yet, right? So you have to go from there. There's some good things that come out of the crisis, right? We always talk about don't waste a crisis and things like that. But one of them is that, especially with, when you talk about inflation, you have to look internally and make choices. So you have to figure out a way, what are the things that you're not going to do, and really balance short-term with long-term, right? Because you know that day is going to be over, right? You always have to understand that that's going to come down. So you do that balance as well, and we've done that, in the sense. And then I would say, just last thing is that kind of pressure also, and look, I've been in India now for almost 6 years, right? So the invention, is amazing when necessities are there, right? So when you go under pressure in crisis, it's amazing how the creativity kicks in and a lot of new ideas comes out, especially if you're really looking outside and putting yourself on the shoes of the folks you're serving. So then new ideas comes up and you'll be surprised. So then technology plays a role, data plays a role. So I'll give you just one example. In Philips, we are in the B2C space, in the consumer space, but also in the healthcare space very strongly. And one of the things kind of building a little bit, Preeti's comment, I would say, oh, thank you so much. I would say that we believe in, our purpose is pretty clear, right? It's about improving people's lives. And we see a huge opportunity, we saw a huge opportunity to connect, tier 1 with tier 2 and tier 3 from a healthcare standpoint. So one of the products that came out or became even accelerated its journey was what we call an eICU, which was in essence the ability to empower ICU hospitals. ICU is in the tier 2, tier 3 cities, by connecting all those devices with technology, bringing all that data to the experts in tier 1. So you still have the medical professions on that, at the other end, but at the same time, you have the best docs that are sitting in the metropolis, in the big city, monitoring those patients from a distance. So that's technology for you. It's an innovation that comes out of the necessity, out of pressure. It's awesome because it fulfills the purpose of improving and saving people's lives, which is really, it's what got us out of bed in the morning. And you can be more proud. So, and then after the recession is over, inflation, you are sitting in with a great brand equity and as well as a great business that is making a difference.
Okay, that opportunity. Never let a crisis go waste, because what you can do in a crisis, you can never do otherwise. Satish, how does a company try and build value for money? When the customer comes, he'll cringe, oh my God, can I pay so much? What do you do to make sure he is at least in the game, he's at least interested in your product?
That's a tough one.
No, okay.
Oh, so his job is to do the answering. I mean, I do the easy job of asking.
Okay. So first thing, probably I'll start with where Preeti left. A strong belief in our organization, which we build in a culture, is probably some of you might really, take it in another way. We strongly believe experience is a deterrent. Clearly, we say experience is a deterrent. The reason is, most of our decisions are based on the past thing which happened. Somewhere in some market, we have taken this decision, and at that circumstances, we did this. So now we try to apply that experience into this without putting into a thing that your external environment has completely changed. Your consumer has changed, your competition has changed, your things have changed. So definitely that is that. Second belief is the best of the brands are built at the worst times. Clear. We see an opportunity in this kind of a market where probably we are a durable company. Media is at its best possible price right now. You invest when it's this one. Get the best media, get the right, medium to consumer. Now, how do we do this one? Like data-driven is, we classify data into two parts. One is, after the acquisition of the customer, and then before the acquisition of the customer. So I take the after the acquisition of the customer. I mean, probably, if ask a question, all of you will have a refrigerator at your home. Okay? India being a vegetarian country, we use the freezer section maybe 2 or 3 times a day. While your refrigerator section you use at least about 8 to 10 times a day. Why is the freezer section is on top and why is the refrigerator section at the bottom? Nobody asked this question. You know, all of us have been using this refrigerator for so many years. This is where we said, okay, why can't we think of something? That's when the bottom mounted refrigerator came in, wherein the freezer section is in the bottom and the refrigerator section is in the top. So that's probably when you dig into the consumer mind, probably you get those things into this one. Second is, again, this is probably at the bottom of the pyramid which we did. In the top end of the segment, most of the people, when they buy a side-by-side, means when we call a 2-door refrigerator, which is side-by-side, again the same thing, the freezer section is almost about 45 to 50%. Most of the things, you know, they don't buy, or even if they buy, it's unused, you know, then you start stuffing things into this one. So again, data, when we looked at, you know, why the consumer is not buying, or if he has bought, when you meet them and understand what it is, then we realized, okay, can we do something? Then 1 year of research, we got a product which is a 3-door refrigerator, wherein you can convert whichever way you want. And it's the made in India, it is made in our Pune plant, and probably it's the only fridge which is available in the refrigerator is available in the Indian space. So this is probably few of the consumer insights on this which we take. And then clearly, like inflation, very clear. We classify every investment in our organization into 3 buckets. One is must do, good to do, and luxury. So in this time when it's there, let's do the must do things first right. Don't try to do something which is luxury when you're not even done your must do. Of course, as a growing organization, you must do some part of your experimentation. Sometimes we do get a proposal which is very clearly we know that it's a luxury item. You know, you will never find our brand being into, you know, sponsoring a rock show or those kind of things. Absolutely no. We still feel probably it's 10 years ahead of us. Let's do the basic things right. And last part which I say is, today with the digital penetration, it gives you a clear space for you to advertise. So I keep, you know, a lot of digital agencies come, and then when we are discussing something, everybody talks about, okay, I attack the top end of the consumer. How do I attack? You know, our question to most of them is, okay, my Narendra is outside. Narendra is the guy who carries me every day, you know. Okay, I keep seeing him. That guy, whenever I walk into the car, okay, I keep seeing, he's seeing his mobile phone. So I keep asking the agencies, tell me something, how do I get this customer? 10 years back, if I have to advertise in my industry, a semi-automatic machine or a low end, we could not do it because it is deterrent to brand, because people, it damages your premium image. You know, then you are supposed to advertise only the premium product so that your brand value is clear. But now it gives you a clear, you can bisect, slice whichever way you want to your digital, okay. Somebody who's having a 5,000 rupees handphone, living in this, with this kind of a media consumption, this habit, okay, put him this ad. In the same time, you can probably bisect this ads into completely different bisect. So this is probably what we see when you're pushed to the corner, you make every rupee to work, you know, must do, good to do, and then probably think those things. That's probably how we bisect the things.
Well,
Yeah,
Vishal,
thanks.
I think his first line kind of almost, perfect point for you to come in. In terms of the data behavior, he said experience, I really like the line, experience is of no use. Gray hair is very difficult to have these days. With some people probably. But in your case, where you're generating, your devices are generating 24/7 data, how do you make sense of that, and what kind of opportunity it creates?
So I think before I go on to that question, I want to just kind of give people a reality check. We started by saying data is soil and everything is growing in the soil. The reality is we are all slave laborers right now in the world of data. And we are slaves to certain large companies who own the data set. And I know Arvind is trying hard to unshackle us from that. So the reality today is, while we talk about data, I think with an exception of what India, with UPI, India Stack, where at least our financial data is now owned by the government or banks and us, the reality is 99% of all data is owned by a few companies. And these companies are using the data for their profit. Their advertising models, so they are targeting ads on you. Some companies are trying to sell you junk food. You will be surprised that suddenly at one time you will get a notification saying pizza and burger, because they exactly know what time you are most vulnerable. So this is a good time to uninstall these food apps, because they are using data to make you unhealthy. Similarly, there are apps which are constantly interrupting you because what they want is your time. And that's where I come in. What I believe is that data in itself is of no use. What you really need is motivation. I think the challenge in specifically health is not about information. Everybody knows they should not smoke, not drink too much, or not eat junk food, but people do that. So data is not the problem. The problem is motivation. And what we are trying to do with data is what I call motivation mining. So the idea is to look at data sets, the experience in this case, and combine that with a larger set of data and figure out what is the trigger for your behavior change. Now, companies do that, social media companies do that for the wrong purpose. They already know from your social media behavior that if somebody is having depression or suicidal. But they're not going to tell them that, hey, see a doctor or go to a therapist. They are showing you how much fun your friends are having in Maldives. So the problem is that they are trying to serve their commercial interests and they don't have your interest in mind. What we at GoQii were trying to do was use data for good. In fact, our tagline is called Be the Force. So the idea what we were trying to develop was, when we look at health, preventative healthcare is not about changing after you are sick, giving you a medicine. It is preventing diabetes, cholesterol, hypertension in the first place. And if you already have that condition, helping you manage or even reverse it. And the best part is it's not very difficult. I mean, I come from the world of computer games and we made people get addicted to all kinds of games. And here, the idea was, how do we use the data to get you do what is good for you? So it's actually not a difficult challenge. Now, coming to the use of data, remember one thing, incentives drive behavior. So just having data without a behavior and an incentive model doesn't work behavior change. So in our case, what we constantly do is reward our users with all kinds of points. And now the best part is, and we were just discussing this with Arvind, what we have done is we have connected this to your virtual age. So you can make your avatar younger and healthier as you become healthier. And now guess what? Who's our biggest ally? Our biggest ally is insurance companies.
Very interesting.
They are saying that, hey, now that you have been able to make a person behavior change, and can we use this data for insurance underwriting? So we've been working extensively with IRDA and many insurance companies, and now we have products with Bajaj, Kotak, Star, where essentially what we are saying is that your insurance plan is what we call outcome-based insurance. So your premium or your sum assured keeps changing, improving, let's put it that way, or reducing your premium based on your dynamic health behavior. And that's really where data needs to be used for good. How do you incentivize good health? How do you incentivize good financial health? And at the end of the day, who owns the data and how do you make sure consumers value it? Today, unfortunately, all of us don't value data. We are putting all kinds of stuff on, social media.
So let me put a headline to that too. Very interesting point that you mentioned. Data in itself may not be so useful. We always heard content is king. Here, the context is King Kong. That's the context in which you put the data.
And I would say motivation is God.
That tops it even better. Nikhil, how's the the usage of data changed over the years, you know, as more opportunities are emerging. And what in such times, tougher times, inflation high, and I'm just not just talking in the context of, you know, we may not have as high an inflation, but still biting. How has that usage changed?
So I'm so delighted, first of all, to hear really the usage of data. I've been born and brought up in data. So, you know, when people talk about data usage, I really feel excited about it. But the reality is that probably this room is far more evolved. Currently, and as I said, a lot of organizations are sitting with a lot of data. And this is what I call information overload or data overload. And the thing is, yes, there are use cases that are sitting in. There are actions that companies are sitting in. But you can imagine just, let's say, 100 sources of data. Probably you are utilizing only 10% of it. And that's where the opportunity is. The second is, data, I see it in two ways. One, it's all about technology, data inflow and everything. I think a lot of people see data means we have to really set up servers, we have to do cloud, engines and everything all together. Yes, that's really good to get the data in. What is important is to create that culture of data absorption. Preeti rightly said, you know, this comes from top. It doesn't really start from bottom. So, and it's a really hard work for organizations to drive that data culture, because it's so easy to just, you know, sit in with a lot of information and not utilizing is a crime. And that's what I see it. Coming to your point of utilization of it and the kind of business that we are in, over last few years, especially post-COVID, I have seen a drastic change in the way, first, the organizations are using, plus newer set of organizations are jumping in. So earlier probably it was more evolved with more budgets and everything coming in. Today I see variety of organizations from financial institutions to everything using the same data in a very different way. And secondly, very important, this pandemic when happened, this was lockdown and everybody got really, it was completely shut down. The retailers were really badly impacted. And therefore this whole discussion started about online, offline, digitalization and main things around that. Today, I see that retailers are really evolving. Maybe Arvind probably would talk about ONDC, how the government is really putting a common retailer to it. I'm talking about a bigger set of retailers who are probably family-owned business. And generally, in a family-owned business, you thrive on what your past experience is. Satish knows, Preeti knows that kind of trade that generally sits in. And as I see today, our relationship with trade, it has drastically changed. We see far more evolved retail community. We see far more actions being taken basis data. We see their expansion happening not by saying that I want to move to next city, but basis the data. And I think these are some of the big changes that I see overall in the whole data community.
Ashu, can I complement this with maybe a practical insight?
Yes.
So everybody knows that chief digital officers and chief information officers actually failed in digital transformation, but COVID was successful. So when COVID was going around, Luminous Power Technologies decided that digital was the way, right? Because backup is still an essential service. People still needed solar. People needed energy, you know? So it was very fascinating how our distribution and our dealer network adapted. We had been talking to our distribution and dealer network to go digital for ages. No form of incentive had kind of worked to the extent that within months we saw the whole trade, literally all across India, move to a platform. We have a platform called M-Partner for our network, and it has different views for dealers and distributors, and essentially they became kind of addicted to it. Now they don't work on looking at their rewards, or they're looking at their promos or offers or whatever else is coming through it, or for that matter their TOD, without actually going to M-Partner. That became the source. And it's quite interesting, necessity is the mother of invention. That behavior literally we witnessed in our business changing I would say overnight. Overnight. And now, you know, we used to have checks coming in as payments. We have 0 checks in the company.
Have you not preserved some of the old ones for, you know, for...
We actually have a locker just for that. Just for that. So the whole, you know, sector, and if you have an appreciation for the sector, these are medium to small size businesses, family led. Like, it was a revolution and you got to witness it. So people, like, digital adoption in the, you know, is something, I think the story to tell here is in India, digital adoption in small to medium business, when it happens, it always happens at scale. So I think that's the good news. The challenge is how to convince.
So I'll just add to that, you know, HDFC, I'm just giving an example. HDFC, the largest housing finance company in the country, before COVID, about 20% of their business leads would come online. Anyone can guess what it is after COVID, maybe 3 months ago? Anyone can give a guess? Hazard a guess at least? It's currently at 92%. 92%. So just imagine, they own about 40-45% of the market. Arvind, you want to add?
So I want to add 2 things. And, you know, Vishal talked about incentives. Preeti talks about how the small and medium enterprises change very rapidly if there is an incentive for them to change. I'll give one example on this. This is very relevant because, you know, why did, of course, we had demonetization, GST, and many other digital things. But suddenly, why do we see a total upsurge in this UPI payments? Why there is zero resistance at the shopkeeper level to accept that QR code that we all go around with? Number one, of course, there is no transaction charges. So they get, you know, whatever you're paying, but that's one part of the behavior. That was cash also. Second is people scared them that, you know, this will make you auditable, right? I mean, that also didn't scare them. But this is how India thinks. This is how Bharat thinks, right? They found that this is how they can get better credit, access to credit. And if they can get, and this is the new age businesses that suddenly realize, like, you know, businesses of GoQii or others, that if you give these merchants using their own data, a much better credit, much unlike the loan sharks, unlike the Chinese lending apps, you can give them much lower rate, the right price credit, which is what they can use. They all were doing this transaction. So that's the real incentive for them, because they're saving 8 to 10% on their and the working capital and credit costs. And they've realized a new thing. And for that, they need to produce data, and that is coming from transactions. So I mean, you and me can think and really plan, but this is how what real India or Bharat thinks, a small merchant in India thinks. And I won't even mention ONDC, because that's what ONDC is also going to do. Now, even level of transactional data, we are going to actually produce SKU level data. So Nikhil will dance hearing this, because now we will tell you which merchant is selling what, and they will store the data. They will own that data. So I'll just keep it short.
I think we need a meeting.
So on the same point, I want to tell you that also business models play an important role in how data is used. So there should not be conflict of interest. For example, you know, teleconsultation is now so much prevalent. We all used virtual consults during COVID.
But the law was changed. So the law was changed during COVID.
Yeah. But after this, the teleconsultation massively dropped. And when we found out the reason was not about technology or doctors or patients. The reason was, for hospitals, OPD is a source of lead gen, and then they convert them to IPD. So if hospitals don't stop doing or stop having patients coming in, their business model doesn't work. So there is technology and then there is data points, but having the right business model makes the bigger difference, and which is why incentivization and all that is so much important. And I think a lot of business models need to evolve very soon.
Yeah, you're right, Vishal. I think we have to move from conflict of interest to complement of interest.
And also the CX part, Satish, if you'd like to come in, because that digital, because you spoke of the importance of digital technologies, how do companies harness that? Because more companies today, given it's going digital, can also harness that opportunity, the CX part.
Yeah, see, most of the products which we are at the top end of the segment is all connected devices. We have the IoT devices, IoT refrigerator, IoT washing machine, air conditioner, everything. So when we were doing some quick study on this one, people buy AC, okay, they bought an air conditioner, but when we actually saw the usage was nothing. So then we realized, said, what is that to be done? So we sent our engineers to see why the consumer is not using it. What is the reason why they were not using? So we set up a team now, so we ensure that, we use the data in the right point. What we do is, we see the utility because we are connected, so we know how many customers are using, who are not using. So then we ensure the engineers reach to the consumer, or there's a call going to them, and then we send them the videos, links and everything, because he has already paid for it. See, for a connected device, he pays about 10% more premium, but he's not using it. So we engage so that, once he starts using it, definitely, the value what he paid, he gets the money back, and then probably the recommendation for the brand also starts going up. That's how we use. And today, most of the cities, we are setting up our smart home concept, where everything is connected today at home. Everything, right from a robo vacuum cleaner to this one, you don't have to be there. Like, for example, I'm sitting here, my apartment in Noida, I can probably start my robo vacuum cleaner set, everything is time is set, so I don't have to be there. So, those user experience is what we are trying to engage the consumer into.
Okay, Daniel, one comment from you as well, and I'll share my mic with you. That's fine. So, the lessons, because that, your experience of LATAM, I just go back to that because for a lot of people listening here, that will be very important. Would you like to repeat some very key things that they need to keep in mind in such times? Some of them would have a dealer network, some of them would be working with partners who are in smaller cities. Would you like to add anything?
Thank you very much. So the conversation is very much around data now, right? And usage of data and obsession around data. And of course, it's super relevant. It's even more relevant today, but it's always being relevant, right? I guess it's just been it's being talked a lot more about it right now. I just would say one thing, guys. It's inflation is tough, recessions, crises are tough. Don't get too crazy about this data. Go back to understand what the needs are of the people that you are serving, okay? And that you can do a lot of times analog as well. So I combine that. Do a little bit of both. And for us, I think it's extremely important that we understand what is making a difference. I truly believe, especially in the usage of our products in healthcare space, the outcome of everything that is happening, right? The results. So one thing is to come up with a solution. The last nugget, I would say, look for the real problem and then the innovation. Don't come up with innovation for the problem after that, because we see too many of those that doesn't scale, that does not really answer true problems, right? They are obsessed about data or obsessed about something else. So you got to combine those and really understand needs.
So I'm told we've run out of time completely. So, but very interesting. And here's a data point. Since we're on the data, we're talking data. In the entire conversation, we had the word analog being used once. And the rest of the time, we were talking digital. That tells you about the way. And these are tough times. So I'll just end with a few lines. For small businesses, average person, inflation is eating it. So, Nikhil, do I have just a couple of lines to say? Can I? Okay. Here's what. All you who sleep tonight, far away from the ones you love, no hand to left or right and emptiness above, know that you aren't alone. The whole world shares your tears, some for 2 nights or one, and some for all their years. That's what data could be for you, all their years. Thank you so much for being a good audience.